Добрый день.
Good afternoon. I welcome you at our weekly briefing in the Press Center of Foreign Ministry. We'll start with the calendar of the Foreign Minister today in Kazan under the presidency of Sergei Lavrov. The Council of the Foreign Ministers of the CSTO is being held. They are discussing the international regional agenda as well as the prospects of cooperation in the context of the organization. Mr. Lavrov will inform the colleagues about the initiatives aimed at implementing the priorities of Russian presidency in the CSTO. We expect that after the extended session, they will approve the documents presented for the consideration of the CSTO on the 11th of November in Moscow, and there will be several joint statements adopted on relevant international issues. After this event, a press conference will be held of the Russian Foreign Minister and the CSTO Secretary General Talatbek Masadikov. You will be able to see it on the website of the Russian Foreign Ministry, so follow it closely. On the 15th and 17th of June, the Foreign Minister of Turkey is going to come to Moscow with a working visit. He's going to have negotiations with the Foreign Minister and other bilateral contacts. They'll exchange views on the development of Russian-Turkish relations and different affairs. The heads of foreign ministers will discuss the key issues of international agenda, the situation in the Middle East, in the Black Sea region, Transcaucasia, Central Asia, and other relevant topics. On the 17th of June, in the Cultural Center of the Office of the Diplomatic Corps of the Foreign Ministry, there will be a presentation of the potential of Chukotka Autonomous Region. The exposition will represent the achievements in social economical development as well as the natural beauty and the culture of this region. The diplomatic corps business circles are invited as well as the representatives of federal, regional authorities and the media. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, is going to make a statement, as well as the governor of the Chukotka Autonomous District, Vladislav Kuznetsov. Let's now speak about the relevant agenda. There were a lot of issues regarding the Middle East. We are concerned by another round of Iranian-USA standoff, which was started by an unprovoked aggression of Israel and the US against Iran. We urge everyone to stop the attacks. And we say that it is absolutely unacceptable to attack civil infrastructure. We are still convinced that there is no alternative to a political, diplomatical solution of this conflict on the basis of international law, taking into account the interests of all the interests of the neighboring states. This outburst of violence only underlines that the fact that the conflict should have been solved instead of once again becoming the witnesses of the escalation. Another relevant point is that a lot of attention is being paid to the issue of the security of the whole region as a whole, and we hope that the situation will return back to the political diplomatical track, and there'll be found a solution based on the negotiations. We received a lot of solutions about the Russia-ASEAN summit that is dedicated to 35 years of our relations that will be held on June 17th, 18th in Kazan. The summit itself will be commented by the administration of the president, as it usually happens, but there are some issues that I can dwell on today. The invitations of the president of Russia were sent to the heads of state of Brunei, East Timor, Vietnam, Indonesia, Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and Philippines, as well as the special representative of President of Myanmar and the ASEAN Secretary General. The leaders are going to exchange views on the most relevant issues of international regional agenda. The head of delegation will discuss deepening of practical cooperation between our country and the association. They will discuss the steps to promote Russian-ASEAN interaction for the nearest future in the political, economic, and humanitarian spheres. After this summit, they are going to adopt several documents that will state common priorities and determine the vector for the further development of Russian-ASEAN dialogue. Before the summit, there will be a business forum Russia-ASEAN with participation of entrepreneurs from our country and from Southeastern Asia states. They'll discuss mutual projects, investment, mutual trade, including youth projects. As you know, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, created in 1967, is formed by 11 countries: Brunei Darussalam, East Timor, Vietnam, Indonesia, Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Singapore, Thailand, and the Philippines. In 2026, ASEAN is being presided by the Republic of the Philippines, and the motto of the Philippine presidency is "Together, moving to our common future." Today, ASEAN has the population of almost 685 million people, the third in the world, total GDP of $3.9 trillion, the fifth in the world, foreign trade turnover of $3.8 trillion. So this is one of the biggest regional organizations that has become a systemic element of the architecture of security and cooperation in the Asia-Pacific region. Its strategic goal is ensuring regional stability, promoting internal ASEAN integration processes, reducing the breach in the development level between the member states. The first contacts between Russia and ASEAN were established in 1991. In 1996, our country has become its full-fledged dialogue partner. In 2005, a joint declaration on development and comprehensive partnership was signed. In 2018, a joint declaration on strategic partnership. A multi-level branched system of mechanism of Russian-ASEAN cooperation was formed. The main element are the summits: Kuala Lumpur 2005, Hanoi 2010, Sochi 2016, Singapore 2018, and a video conference in 2021. Because of the pandemic, we decided to choose this format. We cooperate with the association greatly in politics, security. We discussed the issues of forming in Asia-Pacific region of an equitable, balanced, transparent system of intergovernmental relations. In 2004, Russia joined the Treaty on Friendship and Cooperation in Southeast Asia. This is the Bali Treaty that was signed in 1976. It is one of the fundamental ASEAN documents. We are working systemically in such spheres as trade, investment, energy, agriculture, education, science, technologies, digitalization, of course, tourism. In 2021, an MOU was signed between the Russian Federation and ASEAN on cooperation in the sphere of prevention, elimination of extreme situations. We already commented it a lot. The 2022 was declared the year of scientific and technical cooperation of Russia and ASEAN. In January 2024, Russia received the status of digital partner of the association. Through the financial foundation of dialogue partnership Russia-ASEAN, we implement actively different kind of projects. Since 1991, there is a business council of Russia-ASEAN, business mission from Russia being sent regularly to the countries. In the context of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum and Eastern Economic Forum, we have business dialogues with the association on the platform of the Business Investment Summit of ASEAN that is annually held at the same time as the ASEAN summits. We organize thematic sessions on the issues of Russia-ASEAN interaction. I would also like to say that at the MGIMO University of the Foreign Ministry, since 2010, there is an ASEAN Center that promotes humanitarian, cultural, and scientific interaction. With its participation in 2018, a Russia-ASEAN Research Centers Network was created in 2023. A master's program was started in the University Political Economy of Strategic Partnership Russia-ASEAN. Let's continue with Ukraine. Ukrainian neo-Nazi regime, with the active support, with the sponsorship of their Western supervisors, continues terrorizing civilians, as well as the civilian infrastructure. This is absolutely clearly formulated. Over the past week, The UAF affected 2,077 of our citizens, 43 killed, 234 injured, including 18 minors. I'm going to give you specific facts, so that there, in the states of world minority, would say that they do not know anything. Belgorod region, the 3rd of 9th of June, the strikes of the UAF, 6 people killed, more than 30, including 2 teenagers, injured. Bryansk region, June the 3rd, the 9th, the enemy drones affected 13 people, among them 6 kids. DPR, June the 3rd and 9th, UAF attacks, 9 people killed, more than 25 injured, including 2 teenagers. Zaporizhia region, the same period, UAF attacks, 2 killed, 9 injured. Kursk region, June 3rd, June 9th, attacks of UAF killed 4 people, including 2 machine operators working the field, 12 injured. Leningrad region, 6th of June, terrorist attack of Ukrainian drones, 4 people injured, including a kid. LPR, June 3rd, 9th, UAF shellings, 2 killed, 6 injured, including 2 teenagers. The crimes of the Kiev regime is that these teenagers were just riding bicycles. The Republic of Crimea, June 3rd, 9th, a drone attack against civilian facilities in Simferopol and passenger trains, 5 killed, 11 injured. Sebastopol, 6th of June, a drone attack, 2 people injured. St. Petersburg, 6th of June, UAV attack, 3 injured. Tver region, the 6th of June, a UAV attack, 1 person killed. Kherson region, June 3rd, 9th, air attacks and shelling, 6 people killed, no less than 12 injured. Right now, right before our eyes, we saw an attack of the armed forces of Ukraine, UAF. The panorama of Sebastopol protection, which is called 1854-1855. According to the information that I see, it is absolutely destroyed. This panorama, the defense of Sebastopol, is a worldwide known work of art dedicated to the key battle of the Crimean War, to the fight for the Malakoff kurgan on the 6th of June of 1855, when the Russian forces fought against the English-French army that was much bigger than their army. This is one more evidence why the Westerners use the Kiev regime for their own interests. They need to destroy the evidence of their own crimes, of their own defeats. They already have experience in destroying historical monuments on their own territory, and now they need to destroy their monuments on the territory of the post-Soviet space. They try to destroy monuments with our own hands, disseminating these false historical, pseudo-historical materials and books, trying to influence our internal policy. And then, when they failed, they used the Kiev regime and the drones and explosives and then artillery. They are trying to destroy these monuments physically without covering up their involvement. This is another barbarian act committed by the Kiev regime against a civilian facility. As the head of Sebastopol said, the barbarians affected a thing that really is valued by the residents of the city, trying to destroy our essence. Only these frenzied people could do something like this and attack a museum. So I think this is a very good assessment of what we have seen. but they will be held responsible for everything done. The Russian law enforcement organs continue to accumulate evidence to punish the Kiev regime functionaries, militants, and the foreign mercenaries. 23 years of sentence was given to the militant of National Guard of Ukraine, Igor Gurkusha, who killed a civilian in March 2022. 14 years sentence was given to a Polish mercenary, Wojciech Piotr Ważny, who is now internationally wanted. We regularly speak about this, and you know, this is the work of our law enforcement organs on the front line, in the front. Brothers, sisters, they work. This is what was said by our president. The barbarianism continues in Ukraine, and it is something that they do against themselves, in fact. The 6th of June is a celebration of the world level. This is the birth of the great Russian poet Alexander Pushkin. Traditionally, we celebrate the day of the Russian language this day. And I would like to remind that Pushkin is not just our heritage. The Russian language is not only our heritage. This is a world language. This is a language of the UN. But the Kiev regime that started war against everything related to Russia, first of all, the Russian language, Pushkin is a personal enemy. And the 6th of June for them is not a celebration, is not a national day. It is an important day for the whole world, but not for the Kiev regime. So the monuments to this great poet in Ukraine are being destroyed with maniacal methodicalness. They didn't even spare the monument in Odessa. And why shouldn't they have it destroyed? Because it is located in the borders of the UNESCO World Heritage object, and it was built in the end of the 19th century on the money of the residents of the city. And during all these decades and the centuries, there was an inscription to Alexander Pushkin from the residents of Odessa. But the Kiev regime deprived the residents of Odessa of this monument. The Kiev regime also deprived the residents of Odessa of their citizenship, of their position as the citizens, of understanding of the fact what is a citizen. They deprive them of their historical memory, consciousness. Is there a cure for this? Resistance, even internal resistance, understanding that this is a real, true act of barbarianism of the 21st century. Under this sign of depushkinization, we see a fight against culture, Russian language, Russian literature, historical memory, the heritage of the civilization. The June 1st, the Odessa court banned the organization Ismail Pushkin Society. It is its name which this organization researched the works of the poet. This is their only crime. They were researching Russian literature, Slavic culture. And also there was a club of young Pushkinists in the context of this organization. So why has it become something illegal? This organization existed for 29 years. As Zelensky said, can we say that it has something to do with communism ideology, the Soviet times, maybe some kind of Russian imperialism? No, it existed for 29 years, so these are modern times. This is new Ukraine that was independent and created itself, the organization like this. But the SBU saw in this a threat to national security, in the fact that they were researching the works of Alexander Pushkin. June the 2nd, the Poltava City Council introduced a ban on the Russian contact in the city. So it was not something related to the content, but the fact it was related to the Russian language. They're speaking about the public use of Russian films, music, books, theater performances. Sprachenführer Yelena Ivanovska, that everyone knows, declared it, and she said before these bans are only viable for the Russian products. They do not concern the content in the Russian language, as she said, that was produced in Ukraine.
According to her plan, the use of the Russian language must be paid. She proposes increasing fines for violating language legislation tenfold. According to media reports, the corresponding proposal has already been submitted to Parliament. The next step apparently will be fines for thinking in Russian. In his immortal works, Alexander Pushkin celebrated the ideals of love, friendship, honor, and loyalty to duty and the fatherland, and freedom, by the way. These values, as we see, are alien to the Kiev political party that usurped power and turned into a junta. They have different guiding principles. For example, Ivan Mazepa, who in modern Ukraine has been elevated to the rank of a national hero alongside Nazis like Stepan Bandera, Roman Shukevich, and various Petlyuras and Melniks and so on and so forth. And Alexander Pushkin wrote about this differently in his Poltava poem, that he loves nothing, that he is ready to shed blood like water, that he despises freedom, that there is no fatherland for him. This was said about the traitor Ivan Mazepa. It is him that, how Pushkin characterized him, and it is him that Ukrainian nationalists worship, not Pushkin but Mazepa. And his remains they want to rebury in the so-called pantheon of outstanding Ukrainians. But surely what was said could also be applied to the representatives of Vladimir Zelensky's current regime, who, to please their Western masters, are ready to shed the blood of ordinary Ukrainians like water, to renounce their history, their faith, and their native language. Therefore, it is important for the usurpers to erase all memory of the great poet and his work, so that people, when studying his personality, do not draw such dangerous parallels for the Kiev regime, which present themselves quite naturally. Russian-speaking residents of Kiev clearly expressed their attitude towards the discriminatory policy of the Kiev authorities aimed at eradicating everything Russian on behalf of millions of their compatriots speaking in their native language. They posted a video greeting for Russian Language Day on social media and urged the President's office to stop humiliating the Russian citizens of Ukraine. I believe that there could be no other reaction, but I have a personal question to UNESCO. Please tell me the demolition of another monument to Alexander Pushkin, the prosecution of the Russian language. This is what exists at the funds of Russia. UNESCO has always enjoyed the support of Russia, and what do we receive in return? Our permanent mission in Paris will remind UNESCO Secretariat of its direct obligation not merely to respond to such incidents, but also to work in this direction. Also, I would like to add something to make this picture full. Also, in Kiev, amid the frenzied rejoicing of this regime propagandists, the monument to the great Russian writer Mikhail Bulgakov was dismantled near the famous house of the Turbin, where he lived in his youth, and where his literary memorial museum is located. This is once again one more fact for UNESCO, which exposed the criminal character of Vladimir Zelensky's policy. Back in February 2021, he was publicly stating different things. He was speaking Russian back then, and he commented on the situation quite differently compared to the present moment, and at his instruction, the corresponding policy is being carried out. I will remind you once again. February 2021, while showing the audience Russian language book published in Ukraine, he publicly stated in Russian that there was no ban on publishing the novel the Master and Margarita in the country or in studying in the literature curriculum in Ukrainian schools, he also assured, I quote, news about the banning of Bulgakov in Ukraine is, as Professor Preobrazhensky would say, nonsense of a cosmic scale, unquote. Today, we see that the nonsense of a cosmic scale is being built and is being constructed in Ukraine by the hands of Zelensky and his accomplices, and they are in no way ashamed of this. It is the impression, we have the impression that they are proud of this, but there is as little detail. They deceived their own people, not everyone. Mikhail Bulgakov has been removed from the school curriculum. Monuments have been torn down, and in recent years in Ukraine, according to official Ukrainian data alone, over 11 million books in Russian have been destroyed. And they are pretending that they are not barbarians, that they are not Nazis. Also, we noted the optimistic report regarding a supposed breakthrough in negotiations between Budapest and Kyiv on ensuring the rights of the Hungarian national minority living in Ukraine. According to the Hungarian side, Kyiv has allegedly taken a compromise position. How can we speak about a compromise? The international community has put its names down the rights of peoples to education, to the native language, to access to history, and now we have to speak about compromise. Let it be so. According to the Hungarian side, the Kyiv regime has committed to restoring the system of national schools, where the Hungarian language will be freely used outside the educational process as well, where there will be an opportunity to take final exams in Hungarian language and literature and receive a graduation certificate in Hungarian. In settlements where the share of the Hungarian population exceeds 10%, it will supposedly be possible to use Hungarian national symbols as well as use the Hungarian language when providing medical care, at sports and cultural events and political activities, and in the organization of national holidays. In exchange for this, Budapest is ready to agree to the opening of the first negotiating cluster on Ukraine's accession to the European Union. In general, one could be happy for the Transcarpathian Hungarians that, against the backdrop of systemic violations of the rights of national minorities, I would say elimination and demolition of their rights in Ukraine, some progress has emerged for them, at least at one direction. But there is a little detail in this aspect as well. Now, it refers only the reached agreements in the Action Plan for Ukraine, the implementation of which is needed to advance the country along the European path. In practice, however, the situation of Ukrainian Hungarians has not changed. Kyiv's obligations are not legally enshrined and remain promises, the value of which is well known. At the example of Mikhail Bulgakov. What did Zelensky said back in 2021 that one can print books by Bulgakov and that school curriculum must study Bulgakov, and what do we see now? I have already mentioned this. And one more quote. I believe that this will be, a historical quote, but from our newest history. During the election campaign in 2019, Vladimir Zelensky promised to end the civil war, revise language legislation, fight corruption, and not cling to the presidency. In reality, he demonstrated a complete lack of political will for peace, a readiness to fight until the last Ukrainian is left standing, and to sacrifice the country for the sake of retaining power and personal enrichment. He sanctioned the de facto ban on the Russian language, encourages the gross falsification of history, and cynically mocks cultural heritage. Not only Russian, but all other national minorities in Ukraine. The aforementioned facts confirm the urgency of the tasks of denazifying and demilitarizing Ukraine and eliminating the threats emanating from its territory. All these goals will undoubtedly be achieved. We discussed the historic sacrification of history and the common sense reburying of Nazis, Bandera soldiers, and all others under the pretext that they are creating the pantheon of heroes. Now, another campaign takes place in order to glorify neo-Nazi accomplices. Now they are implementing the plan to bring from Europe of Melik and Carnivals. And now we have new candidates for reburying in this infernal pantheon of those pseudo-heroes and killers of their own peoples. They are trying to systemize and reincarnate and rebury. The embassy of Ukraine in Paris marked the 8th on May 27th. How one could believe of Semyon Petlyura. They organized the ceremony under the Arc of Triumph, as well as at his grave in the Montparnasse Cemetery. The Ukrainian ambassador was accompanied by the 152nd Separate Semyon Petlyura Brigade, carrying battle flags along with local clergy from the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. And on May 28th, the Ukrainian Cultural Center in Paris hosted a presentation of a book by a lawyer of Ukrainian descent, Gilles Antonovich, titled The Petlyura File, Ukraine, the French Case, 1926-1927. This publication represents yet another clumsy attempt to rehabilitate Semyon Petlyura, absolve him of responsibility for all the atrocities and mass Jewish pogroms and attacks, to mold this predecessor Bandera into the image of a national hero who supposedly laid the foundations for a democratic and Western-centered, Western-leaning Ukraine. Naturally, the French media did not miss the opportunity to widely disseminate this pseudo-scientific information. It is noteworthy that for French press there is no room for the tragedy in Starobelsk that claimed lives of 21 children, college students. No, there was no room for that. But to put this unworthy information about Petlyura on the pages of their newspapers, yes, they have ink and paper for that. Simultaneously with the events glorifying Semyon Petlyura, a monument to the remarkable Russian writer Mikhail Bulgakov was dismantled. At the same time, Bulgakov despised Petlyura, and in his novel The White Guard, he explained quite clearly why everything which I have mentioned is in direct connection. Kiev regime and its so-called heroes, and for all of us, for all normal people, the overwhelming majority, everything is clear with them. However, we would advise the French authorities to check their historical facts, to read more before approving ceremonies that undermine the credibility of the Fifth Republic itself. Speaking about sponsors of the Kiev regime, as we all know, Canada positions itself as a highly peaceful country. It takes pride in its participation in peacekeeping operations, expresses concern over the dangers posed by anti-personnel mines, and calls for strict compliance with the UN Charter and international humanitarian law, including in Ukraine. In general, it actively champions universal prosperity, democracy, and world peace. And now, just the other day, we learn that this supposedly peace-loving country became party, you think out to what? not the humanitarian project to help the victims of the Starobelsk attack carried out by the Kiev regime. They arranged to establish a production facility for strike and reconnaissance unmanned aerial vehicles on its territory. These very aerial vehicles, they used to kill children, civilians, maternity homes, hospitals. The very aerial vehicles they use to strike paramedics, firefighters, rescue services. On May 25th, with the support of the Canadian Department of National Defense, a joint venture was established between private company Sentinel from the Canadian province of Ontario and the Kiev-based company Aerologics. They signed an agreement on intellectual property and licensing, which includes knowledge and experience sharing. The Canadians provide the know-how in composite materials and manufacturing methods, while neo-Nazis provide knowledge of actual combat conditions. They will share how they carry out terrorist attacks. And these so-called knowledge, how to kill civilians by drones, how to strike civilian infrastructure, they are in abundance. However, for some reason, Ottawa fails to recall the principles of international humanitarian law in this context. As we can see, in the field of development manufacturing these relatively inexpensive but highly effective 21st century instruments of murder, the state, which fears, in the words of its prime minister, being on the menu, is clearly unwilling to fall behind. As a result of the deal, the Canadians acquire a profitable military production facility in their own soil, while the Ukrainians hide their much-needed strategic reserve of military resources from Russian strikes on another continent, in a third country that supposedly is not a party to the conflict. How come? How come? We see it all, we know it all, we make the corresponding conclusions. The new joint venture plans to produce several thousand UAVs per year. The Canadians intend to begin rolling out the products, and I must emphasize these are deadly, multi-purpose, low-flying, fixed-wing drones with a range of up to 500 kilometers before the end of this year. You know, this refers to the New Year Act of Peace-Loving. The Canadian Military Department will purchase the finished items from Sentinel and transfer them to the Ukrainian Armed Forces free of charge. All products will be supplied to Ukraine, officially for use against the armed forces of the Russian Federation. But to put it in plain terms, to kill Russians. Do you remember how George Bush Jr. said that the goal of the Kiev regime is to kill as many Russians as possible? Thus, as we can see, Canada has moved to a qualitatively new level of involvement in the Ukrainian crisis. All masks have been discarded, and the true-based nature of what is by no means a peace-loving state, but rather a warmonger, seeking to further fuel the Russian-Ukrainian conflict by all possible means, has been laid bare. We reserve the right to an adequate response, and we will factor these new circumstances into our military political planning, and we will for sure publish the correspondent addresses of these production facilities on the territory of Canada. People must know about this. The situation around Moldova. On June the 2nd, the charge d'affaires of Russia was handed a note of protest at the Moldovan Foreign Ministry, claiming that a supposedly Russian explosive-laden unmanned aerial vehicle crashed in Galati, Romania on May 29. So, I will just recall you. So, an incident occurs in Romania, not Moldova, yet Chisinau sounds the alarm, and Chisinau is not interested in the fact that they are being drawn into a anti-peace-loving course, which is not peculiar to Moldova. Chisinau does not any evidence that the UAV has no Russian origin, Their main goal is to score Russophobic points and demonstrate their solidarity with Bucharest. Moldovan experts openly point out that the surge in anti-Russian drone hysteria in the Republic is linked to plans to open the first negotiating cluster on Moldova's accession to the European Union in the near future, as well as the upcoming second Moldova-EU summit in Brussels on June 22nd. In its eagerness to show loyalty to Brussels officials, Chisinau continues to signal its readiness to join the EU, even at the cost of losing its independence, sovereignty, and national identity.
Unlike Russian diplomats are being called to the Foreign Ministry of Moldova not giving any evidence, we do have evidence. The Vice Premier, Minister of Economic Development and Digitalization of the Republic, Evgenia Smakescu, said on June the 2nd that in the context of joining of the EU, there is a Plan B of official Chisinau, which includes uniting with Romania. If it will happen if a treaty on joining the EU will not be signed till the end of 2028. So can you imagine this alternative given to the citizens of Moldova? So now the leadership that they entrusted the power with is calling them Romanians. So maybe you do not want to be part of the EU, but you will have to, but we will present you as Romanians. Well, actually you are Moldovans, but if we will not be accepted into the EU by some reason, then we Moldovans, Romanians will join it in any way. But we will have to renounce our own sovereignty. We will renounce the fact that we are a sovereign state of Moldova and that we are Moldovans. And we will become part of Romania. But at the same time, we will be in the EU, but we will be part of Romania in this case. This is genius. You know what it resembles? When, for instance, a creature that eats people goes near a man and asks, you know, do you want to go to the theater, but I will have to eat you before that. But you will go to the theater, but you will be in my stomach. Well, I haven't seen such a mockery of the common sense. I haven't seen anything like this. Some methods were used. The 25th image, some kind of work with historical documents, but so outright actions. So if you want to be part of the EU, become part of a different state, well, I cannot remember such open actions. This Moldovan minister, maybe he already calls himself a Romanian minister, said that there is no threat in losing the identity of the Republic because the majority of the population of the country already support close cultural and family ties with Romania, and many of them have Romanian citizenship. The opinion of the Moldovans, many of them identify themselves as Moldovans and not Romanians, as always was ignored. So please forgive me. Where are all those international structures? I'm just curious. Where is UNESCO? Where is it? When, in its zone of responsibility, people change everything. Language, nationality, culture, history. People are deprived of all of it, not under the pretext of economic benefits, but some other benefits of the right to live in their own country. Where are all these human rights protection services? Where are these notorious, what was its name again, PASE and European parliaments? Where are all of them? What are they concerned about? Is everything that happens in China and Latin America? But this is Europe. This is your zone of responsibility. European Parliament, do you not think what is happening? The second fact, the Central Electoral Commission of Moldova elaborates the legislative initiatives to change the order of referendums on the essential issues for the life of the country. The experts fear that it will create a possibility for dismantling the neutral status of the Republic, which is stated in its constitution, but not in some kind of documents, but in the main document of the country, constitution. The Chisinau is existing the pressure on Gagauzia in order to eliminate its autonomous status. On June the 4th, the Central Electoral Commission of Moldova approved several amendments to the code on the elections of the Republic to limit the authorities of the region. So the Comrade will not have an opportunity to form its own electoral commission. A new structure will be created that will be fully controlled by Chisinau, the Central Electoral Council. The candidates of this council will be verified by law enforcement structures of Moldova, including the Information Security Service. Another fact, the offensive on the Russian language continues and everything that is associated with Russia. On May the 27th, the diplomats of our embassy in Moldova gave to a library in Comrade books in the Russian language, classical Russian literature, Russian journal, Russian field. But then these books were seized, by, as you have known very well, by the Security Information Service of Moldova under the pretext, which is very interesting, verification for extremist content. Of course. Well, it's Russian classics. Anyone can find it there. It's like a Goebbels structure to create punishment organizations under the pretext of information work. These are all types of anti-utopias and utopias that were described by Orwell and many others, like the Ministry of Truth and the same. So the Chisinau regimes everything to gain points before Brussels in order to join this European family. And in fact, the existence of Moldova is on the map right now. And the opinion of common Moldovans has been ignored. This is the true phase of Euro integration. Well, if we're speaking about human rights, well, as we're speaking about the European continent, attention is not being paid to this problem, but we, with our Belarus colleagues, have prepared the third joint report on the situation with the human rights in certain countries. It was prepared by the foreign ministers of two countries. This continuation of annual work of our ministries to draw attention of the international community to the real threats in this sphere. This report will be presented on June the 30th, as well as on July the 7th and July the 9th in the Executive Committee of CIS and Minsk, in the headquarters of the OSCE in Vienna, and on the margins of the 62nd session of the UN Council on Human Rights in Geneva. There is additional materials in this regard. We have gathered information about the serious problems of the modern times, the decimation of ideology that justifies inequality. In fact, we see racism, discrimination, lack of tolerance. The danger is that this ideology and methods are being used by the West to preserve the dominance that they have lost, and they are trying to return it at any cost. Now through direct colonial exploitation, and now through neo-colonial means and practices. They want to continue these 500 years of dominance. The threat is seen by the West in the sovereign independence of the countries that in their history, by their labor, their fight, have gained the right to be sovereign and independent. The confrontation is increasing, the pressure is increasing in sovereign countries, coming to direct military interference and sometimes the capturing of legitimate leaders of the country. The cynical practices seen in Ukraine, Middle East, Central Asia, South Caucasus, Latin America. The West has discredited its own model of development and security. And it can is not capable of honest competitiveness, and it is mired in politicization of international relations. These irresponsible, destructive actions lead to dismantling the after-war system of international relations. We are returning to pre-state chaos, destruction of true humanism, preparing the new morality, the renewed one, to remove everything that you don't need and leave only the convenient. The morality that legitimizes the inequality, the right to destroy those who are not to their liking. And such approaches must be confronted by the whole of the world community. Only this way we can eradicate colonialism and to prevent the subjugation of international law. This report, unlike the so-called Western surveys, is not used for moralizing anyone. It is based on the NGO materials and the recommendation of the UN human rights protection mechanisms. It generalizes the fact of violations. And as for the moral assessment, the readers will have their own assessment of it. These comment and this report will be presented in our resource on June the 15th, so follow our website. An important date for the SCO, it's the 25 years of this organization that we're going to celebrate in a few days on June the 15th. It started in the format of 6 states: Russia, Kazakhstan, China, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. Today, SCO is a powerful regional association. Over this period, the organization was also joined by other countries: Belarus, India, Iran, Pakistan. 15 dialogue partners participate in the joint work from Asian and Middle East countries, and there are 2 observer states, Afghanistan and Mongolia. Right now, SCO has asserted itself as respected, powerful platform based on cooperation, equality, mutual respect, and consideration of interests. The geographical area includes practically the whole of Eurasia, where the half of population of Earth lives. The share of participants of this association in the GDP reached a third, and this association is very attractive because there are many, more than 10 applications to join it. We do everything to strengthen the role in promoting the process of sustainable growth and forming multiple world order. The organization becomes a fundament for building an Eurasia of a balanced architecture of equal, indivisible security, stability that ensures the interests of the maximum number of countries. The social economic fundament of this system is going to be the Great Eurasian Partnership, based on close cooperation of states and multilateral associations of the regions and convergence of national strategies. Specific measures for further development of interaction in the spheres of policy, security, economy, and cultural humanitarian ties will be considered at the next session of the Council of Heads of State and the summit and the format of SCO Plus celebrated, will be held in Bishkek on August 31st, September 1st, and the Council of Heads of State in October 19th, 20th in Dushanbe. A contribution to strengthen economic and business cooperation in the SCO area was a special thematic session organized by initiative of the Trade and Commerce Chamber of Russia on the 4th of June during the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Russia will continue to supporting the presidency of Kyrgyzstan that is being held under the motto of 25 years of SCO, together to the sustainable peace, development and prosperity. We are concerned that together we will give additional momentum and dynamics to its further evolution. Another important date, on the 17th of June this year, we will celebrate 90 years since the birth of an eminent philologist, the first female rector of St. Petersburg State University, the president of the National Association of Teachers of the Russian Language, and the founder of the Foundation Russian World, Lyudmila Verbitskaya. the invaluable contribution of distinguished linguist of the support of Russianists all over the world. Her scientific words influence the theory, methods, and standards of teaching, tests of the Russian language as the foreign language. The pupils and followers of Lyudmila Verbitskaya abroad continue to use and develop the concept and practices introduced by her. The strengthening of the position of the Russian world, the expansion of the Russian world and the Russian-speaking area were always very important for Lyudmila Verbitskaya, and she considered that it was a very important national task, being the one who created the Council for the Russian Language of the President of the Russian Federation. A documentary, the main Russianist of the planet, will be presented with the subtitles in 5 languages: English, Arab, Spanish, Chinese, and French. Russian diplomatic missions are going to organize thematical expositions with the demonstration of posters that were used in St. Petersburg in the context of the large-scale educational campaign initiated by Lyudmila Verbitskaya in 2007 that is called Let's Speak as the Residents of St. Petersburg. We're convinced that our common joint efforts to promote Russian language abroad will put into practice one of the mottos of Lyudmila Verbitskaya: planet should start speaking Russian, and we'll give the references to this in the text of our briefing today. And of course, we have a briefing on the verge of a very important event for us, and we are all going to celebrate this day, the Day of Russia. In this regard, I would like to start with the text that this year is going to have 100 years. On June 8th, 1926, in the Riga journal Peresvony, a statement by Russian philosopher Ivan Ilyin was published. It was called About Russia. It was pronounced by him in Berlin at the Day of Russian Culture, and there were words as if they were written today. Without changing a letter, I'm going to quote: being Russian means to see Russia in the God's beam, in its eternal tissue, its timeless substance, and with love accept it as one of the main and cherished values of your own personal life. Being Russian means believe in Russia, as all great Russian people, all its genius and its builders believed in it. Only in this faith we can assert our fight for it and for our victory. The end of quote. It was 100 years ago, but it is still relevant. You know, I would like to say that it is surprising. This national day in every state is being celebrated by the different people, different compatriots, people from different countries, people who have the citizenship of our country, of a different country. But these are people that have something to do with the country through the culture, through other aspects. But our Day of Russia becomes a national day for the people who become citizens of Russia right now. Not despite the pressure that's being exerted, but understanding that they will have to endure, but seeing the destructive processes that are happening in the Western minority states, they understand that they want to be part of Russia. They want to celebrate the 12th of June as their own Day of Russia. But because we see, as the decree is being implemented that was signed by the President of the Russian Federation in August 2024, decree number 742 on humanitarian support of foreign citizens who share our traditional, spiritual and moral values. These are people from the Western countries, the same countries that 100 years ago demonstrated opportunities, as they said, to be the bastion of freedom, but now they have lost the moral right to claim that they are such a bastion. So people are coming from this country, become the citizens of our country because they want to have the right to raise their children as they consider correct. because they want to call a spade, and they want to live normally, but not to live according to the standards of a new normality, as it is said in the West right now. According to our data, since the entry into force of this decree, we have seen more people coming to Russia from Germany, France, Italy, the USA, Estonia. What does Kaya Kallas think about this? Does she know about this? Russian regions accept whole families from these and other countries. The record number of foreign students study in our universities. The entrepreneurs from friendly countries open their business here today. Today, Russia has become a country that people love, and the whole generations of people live here. And those who are trying to be saved from the new normality come here. I would like to congratulate everyone on this celebration. I would like to congratulate you on the Day of Russia. Please read Russian classics. Watch our theatrical performances on the classical works. Go to our museums. Visit them personally. Use the internet for this, for instance.
Listen to classical music by Russian composers. Remember that Russia is a multinational country. Listen to our ethnic music. Remember the pages from history of various regions. Learn and get inspired by artisan arts and handicraft. I congratulate all of you on the upcoming holiday, the Russia Day. And now we proceed to the Q&A session, Международная жизнь, International Life. Are you with us? Thank you very much, Madam Zakharova. We congratulate you as well. The other day in the European Union, and Kaya Kallas reminded of this, they issued the permission to detain warships in the Mediterranean Sea, the tankers that Brussels refers to the so-called Shadow Fleet, and is suspected in transporting the Russian oil. What do you think about this? And doesn't this remind you of letters of reprisal? Speaking about the operation of the European Union deployed in the Mediterranean Sea of their naval operation arena in order to inspect and seize warships is the blatant violation of international law. Let me remind you that the objectives of the so-called arena reaffirmed by the United Nations Security Council, I would quote this, control of embargo observance on sending arms and equipment to Libya, monitoring, observance, and data collection when it comes to illegitimate export from Libya, Libyan crude oil and oil products, and also inspecting illegal human trafficking in open seas. This mandate expired this past May. Any activities carried out by this European Union operation towards civil ships in Libyan territorial waters without consent of Tripoli are considered to be illegal. Also, I would like to remind you that the notion of the shadow fleet that they use does not exist in the international legal framework. If they find it somewhere, let them show it. This is the political fiction of the European Union and its member states of this Russophobic minority. Inspection and detainment of civil ships that meet the criteria of free and unimpeded maritime navigation under the falsified pretext without the sanction of the United Nations Security Council are illegal. At the same time, the European Union poses a direct threat for safe navigation as they use their naval forces to intimidate commercial operators. At the same time, they silence cynically the cases of the use of Ukrainian drones against commercial fleets of Russia and other countries. They are trying to deprive the states of global south and developing markets from access to the needed energy resources. We reserve the right to use the whole arsenal of political, legal, and other tools that we possess in order to defend our maritime security and legitimate interests of shippers and vessel owners. The responsibility to any incidents and escalation in the Mediterranean Sea will belong to the initiators of the escalation, represented by Kai Kallas and her company. Thank you very much. We are moving forward. Ria News, are you with us? Good afternoon. I would like to congratulate you on this occasion as well. Today we have one question. On June 16, 2006, the Russian-Kazakhstan intergovernmental agreement entered into force, launching the Eurasian Development Bank. How would you comment on this anniversary? Let me just remind you that Russia and Kazakhstan stood at the very origins of the Eurasian Development Bank and are its key participants. Between 2009 and 2011, Armenia, Tajikistan, Belarus, and Kyrgyzstan joined in 2025. Last year, Uzbekistan also became a member. Currently, Oman is completing domestic procedures to become a shareholder of the Eurasian Development Bank. Thus, the financial institution will soon significantly expand its geography and expertise correspondingly. Over its 20 years of existence, the bank has become one of the key development institutions in the region and has proven the strong demand for its analytical capabilities. We have to note that the EDB's unwavering priority has always been the implementation of projects with an integration effect. From a sectoral perspective, the largest share of investments goes to initiatives in the mining and chemical industries, energy transport, and the financial sector. Despite illegitimate unilateral measures imposed by Western countries against individual member states of the bank, the EDB's loan portfolio has shown stable positive dynamics in recent years. The financial institution has already reached the mark of $21 billion in approved financing from 2022 to 2025. The volume of loans issued by the bank amounted to $9.15 billion, which is 1.5 times more than the estimates for 2018-2021. Thank you so much. Союзный TV channel, are you with us? If Союзный TV channel is not with us, Известия. Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Let me also congratulate you on the upcoming holiday. We have several questions to you today. Thank you so much. We congratulate you as well. U.S. President Donald Trump on June 8th conceded the possibility of ordering U.S. special forces landing on Iranian territory if talks between Washington and Tehran fail on the substance. What long-term consequences for regional security does Moscow foresee if the threat of U.S. special forces landing in Iran materializes? What measures of international cooperation is Russia prepared to offer to prevent an armed conflict in the event of the talks? If the talks fail, I have already given our assessments of the situation in the opening part. Russian Federation consistently and fundamentally proceeds from the necessity of resolving the current crisis surrounding Iran, which was provoked by U.S. and Israel without any foundation. They committed an act of aggression against a sovereign state through strictly diplomatic means. We believe that this crisis should be solved by diplomatic means. We regularly conveyed this position to the American side at all levels. Despite the ongoing negotiation process, this situation remains extremely volatile. Any ground operation would mean a further escalation of tension, which is fraught with irreparable consequences not only for each of the parties involved, but also undoubtedly for regional and global security. European Union services have proposed adding over 80 items to the new package of anti-Russian sanctions. What diplomatic and legal measures does Russia plan to take in response to the expansion of the EU sanctions list? How does Moscow assess the risks of further escalation in sanctions pressure and its impact on global stability and strategic predictability? When one speaks about relations between Russia and European Union, different assessments can be given. You know them quite well. But there is a particular share of stability and predictability. The European Union continues to manufacture new packages of illegal restrictions against Russia. In Brussels, they completely refuse to understand that they have not achieved and will not achieve their goals or influence in our sovereign policy. But since the Euro bureaucrats are no longer capable of stopping the sanctions flywheel, all they can do is threaten us with new restrictions without asking themselves where they end up. At the same time, anti-Russian sanctions are increasingly taking on an essentially international extraterritorial character. The focus is placed on Russia's interaction with key close trade and economic partners. A number of countries whose economic operators end up on EU blacklist are steadily growing, and this causes discontent among the countries of the global majority as the imposed restrictions destabilize energy and food markets as well as industrial raw material markets and undermine established production, logistics, and transport chains. This also affects Brussels itself. Russia strongly condemns any legitimate unilateral coercive measures. More and more states share and support this approach, and naturally, effective and tough steps will follow from our side in response to yet another EU sanctions package. Thank you very much. China Media Corporation, are you with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. We have one question today. I also align myself with congratulations voiced by my colleagues. Tomorrow, the Global Human Rights Governance Forum will take place in Beijing. China views the right to existence and the right to development as fundamental human rights and advocates for their advancement through development and cooperation. Given serious global challenges such as poverty, climate change, and the energy crisis, how do you evaluate the approach that prioritizes the right to development? Does this approach correspond to the real needs of the peoples of the majority of countries in the world? Russia strictly adheres to the norms of international law. We proceed from the fundamental premise that all human rights, civil and political, social, economic, cultural, as well as the right to development, are universal, indivisible, interdependent, and interrelated. The UN Declaration on the Right to Development of December 4th, 1986 defines it as an inalienable human right by virtue of which every human person and all peoples are entitled to participate in, contribute to, and enjoy economic, social, cultural, and political development in which all human rights and fundamental freedoms can be fully realized. In other words, this right is primarily a matter of having the appropriate opportunities. It must seem funny and tricky to comment on this subject in response to Right after my response to the question on the legitimate sanctions introduced by the West, they impose against peoples, thus hindering their opportunities for development. Unfortunately, despite the fact that 4 decades have passed since the adoption of the declaration, we cannot yet speak of its realization, and we understand why. Because there are such actors that undermine the whole process. I mean, the Western minority in rhetoric, they never abandon lofty words dealing with human rights, but in reality, they undermine these human rights. As of today, a number of systemic problems preventing the initiation of this process remain unresolved, and they have been exacerbated due to concrete actions, not because some circumstances made them fail, but due to man-made processes due to the position of Western minority. For instance, there is no universally recognized consensus regarding the right to development. As is well known, the countries of the collective West traditionally neglect economic, social, and cultural rights in favor of political and civil ones. But now, they neglect all rights. In general, this factor predetermines their skeptical, or to call things by their proper names, overtly dismissive attitude towards the right to development. Furthermore, Western legal experts believe that it cannot be considered a legal category because, due to its specific characteristics, having both an individual and a collective component simultaneously, they claim it cannot be defended in court. The countries of the global majority categorically disagree with such interpretations. They view this right as an opportunity for peoples to independently choose their development model and consequently to possess full economic sovereignty and control over natural resources. They proceed from the understanding that poverty is a serious human rights violation, and before speaking about economic and political rights and freedoms, one must ensure economic growth, including through the development of vital infrastructure and by providing access to quality education and healthcare. Political liberalization, in turn, is merely a final stage that should only be transitioned to after the basic rights and needs of citizens have been met. Non-Western countries are also convinced that wealthy nations gained their advantages through colonialism, exploitation, and now these peoples are denied this right to development. Exploitation of what does not belong to them, water and other resources, international trade and financial systems preserve and entrench this kind of inequality. And in this regard, they demand a fairer international trade system, technology transfer, debt cancellation, the reform of international financial institutions, and the overcoming of historical inequality. Russian approaches to the issue of realizing the right to development are largely in tune with the position of the global South. We are convinced of the importance of the full recognition, implementation, protection, promotion of the right to development as a tool for correcting historical injustice and eliminating existing imbalances in global economic development. Today, the provisions of the declaration are more relevant than ever. China's example serves as clear evidence of the success that can be achieved when the right to development is made a priority. Russia's responsible approach to the implementation of this right is confirmed by our high-level participation in the 2026 Forum on Global Human Rights Governments, which, as you just said, which will take place in Beijing on June 11-12. Our country will be represented here by Grigory Lukyantsev, Director of the Department for Multilateral Human Rights Cooperation, the Russian Foreign Ministry as Commissioner for Human Rights, Democracy and the Rule of Law. We would also like to emphasize that cooperation with Russia and China is a stabilizing factor in a global political system that is currently navigating turbulent international relations. This fully applies to human rights issues as well. Together with our Chinese partners, we intend to continue to exert efforts to develop constructive dialogue and cooperation in the field of human rights in a multilateral format to promote universal human values and to counter the politicization of human rights double standard policies and the use of human rights issues to interfere in the internal affairs of other states, we are committed to jointly promoting the development of all aspects of the international human rights agenda. Genuine human rights in their entireness and interrelation. Thank you very much. Shihuan, are you with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. I congratulate you on the upcoming holiday. We have one question today. From June 8 to 14, an international festival of Chinese cinema in Russia is taking place in Moscow, Yekaterinburg, and Vladivostok. During President Vladimir Putin's visit to China, Russia and China signed a memorandum of understanding on cooperation in the field of joint film production between the China Film Administration and the Ministry of Culture of the Russian Federation. The two sides have already collaborated on the film Red Silk. Are there other plans for cooperation? What proposals do you have for strengthening cooperation between China and Russia in the humanitarian sphere? Thank you. Russian-Chinese cooperation in the field of film production takes a special place in our humanitarian ties between our countries. The holding of the Cross Years of Culture in 2024-2025 has given bilateral cooperation in this area a new dynamic and a new quality of development. In May 2025, as you justly put it, during the visit of President Xi Jinping to Moscow, an action plan for joint film production between the Ministry of Culture of the Russian Federation and the China Film Administration up to 2030 was adopted. The memorandum you mentioned was signed exactly to further develop the agreements outlined in this document.
There's another aspect that the pace set by the culture years is being preserved, and joint projects, the results of these joint projects are the film Red Silk, and there'll be a continuation, a sequel to Black Silk, and I think that the production of this film in China have already finalized, as far as I know. And we hope that the viewers on both sides of the border will be interested in this film. We also work on other interesting cinema projects. I would also like to point out that our cooperation is large-scale and multifaceted in the sphere of the cinema. Representatives of the cinema industry participate actively in the competitions and the festivals in Russia and China. You have seen that our Russian films were presented at the Beijing International Cinema Festival on April 16-25 this year. China's cinemas were presented at the Moscow International Film Festival. And I can say that the base documentary of the 48th Moscow International Cinema Festival was the film A Long Way Home, and the Russian military drama Blood Type received the main award of the Asian Festival of the films in Macau, the Gold Petrel. And we regularly have working meetings of cinema workers of both countries. The festival that you mentioned, the Festival of Chinese Cinema, it was started in Russia this week in Moscow, Yekaterinburg, and Vladivostok. This is a great example of interaction. This year we have planned a Festival of Russian Cinema in China. These events are also included in our calendar. I'm speaking about the list of the events for 2025 and 2026 in the context of the education years between Russia and China. Of course, all of this is used for raising awareness, education. Of course, this is also a way to enjoy ourselves, but at the same time, it includes this educational element. The task of this educational activity is to introduce the culture to the young people of both countries. We're neighbors, we have common history, we have good prospects, so let us wish these festivals to implement their tasks, and all the best. And I can remember the Chinese cinema producers who were on the festival, brilliant Butterfly. The previous year it was the first festival, and this year it is going to be presented once again, and all the countries can have an opportunity to send their films to this festival. And I can remember that there were Chinese film producers, and we were positively shocked by the attention that was given to their work in Moscow when the organizers of Diamond Butterfly received them. So what can we say? The high level of relations reached between our states allows to have good prospects in all the spheres of humanitarian interaction, including, of course, such genre loved by the people as cinema. So we hope we will strengthen these dynamics, develop relevant ties in these and other spheres. Thank you very much. Rita, are you here? Madam Zakharova, good afternoon. We're here. We have a question about Syria. On Saturday, Russian-Syrian Business Council said that Moscow is going to have a full-scale support for the creation of logistic hub on the base of port Tartus for dissemination of Russian goods in Syria and in the nearby markets, and to simplify settlements. Can we speak about the strengthening of trade and economic cooperation between Russia and Syria? What are the further plans of Russia regarding Syria, and what Russia is going to do with its military bases in Tartus and Maymin? Well, if you understand clearly that the military presence, military cooperation, usually from the point of view of information, is conducted in a closed format, understandably. We have spoken in detail about this topic during regular briefings, answering to the appearing questions. Our cooperation between Russia and Syria, is developing very actively. We are expanding multifaceted interaction between our countries, and this work continues. The state agencies as well as the entrepreneurs are involved in this activity. This is actively used to promote a Russian-Syrian Commission on trade, economic, and scientific and technical cooperation. In the contacts with Syrian partners, we discuss our presence in the Syrian Arab Republic in the context of possible reforming of the functions of the Russian military facilities. But of course, once again, these questions should be referred to our Ministry of Defense. Thank you. Thank you. Balt News are here. Yes, Madam Zakharova, I thank you. We congratulate you on the Day of Russia. You too. The State Court of Estonia supported the parliament, saying that the law on the breach of ties with the Moscow Patriarchy is a constitutional one, and despite the position of the president who didn't sign the law. Is it a gross violation of the believers who want to preserve their spiritual tie with the Russian Orthodox Church, and how the foreign ministry can protect their compatriots? You know, everything that happens in Estonia, the native country of Kaja Kallas, I think that this country will be known for her as well, given the extraordinary nature of this political figure. Everything that has happened there causes just one thing, just one desire to say, well, have fear of the God. I think this phrase can be absolutely used in this sphere, because you cannot include politics in religion. There is no document that allows to do this, but there is a great number of documents that bans such kind of actions. We condemn such actions because they are going to violate such rights as the freedom of religion, the freedom of religious assembly. We will remind that Estonia participates in international agreements that regulate the interaction of the state with the religion. So, in fact, this country follows legal obligations to abstain from discrimination regarding religious organizations. However, Estonian authorities, I will remind, Estonia, the native country of Kaja Kallas, consciously violating the provisions of International Convention on Elimination of all the forms of racial discrimination of 1965, International Pact of Civil and Political Rights of 1966, European Convention on Human Rights of 1950, the Framework Convention on the Protection of National Minorities of the Council of Europe of 1995, and the Charter of the European Union on the Fundamental Rights of 2000. Now you understand why they're replacing international law with the rules-based order, because their rules contradict the right that, with their participation, was created. Russia will not turn a blind eye to it. We will raise the topic of the violation of rights and discrimination in Estonia of Orthodox Christian Church at the international platforms of the Third Committee of the UN General Assembly, UN Council on the Human Rights, and the OSCE Permanent Council, and in the context of human rights protection organizations. And also UNESCO has something to do on this track, so we will try to get an adequate reaction of the world community to the arbitrariness that happens in Estonia. So this is some demonic actions that are happening there. Thank you very much. Thank you. Portal Newsroom, are you here? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. I congratulate you on the Day of Russia and the whole of diplomatic corps that is in Moscow and all over the world. Thank you very much. Thank you indeed. I congratulate everyone on this day, everyone who has something to do with it, and those who love our country. Thank you very much. Thank you. We have two questions. The first, the leaders of the UK, France, and Germany, together with Zelensky, published a program statement with 5 basic conditions to start the process of settlement, supporting direct negotiations of Moscow and Kiev with the obligatory participation of the EU. They include reliable, legally binding guarantees of security for Ukraine, including the deployment of multinational forces and the preservation of the frozen Russian assets before the full compensation of the damages. What Moscow thinks about these conditions, is it a realistic basis for negotiations? Globally, I can say that there is nothing new in it. I would like to point out the assessments that were given to the role in the modern context. The President of Russia, he assessed the negotiation efforts of these countries, as well as their relevant actions, our current actions on the Ukrainian track. You can see the statement of our president at the St. Petersburg Forum when he spoke at the plenary session. As for their direct activity, in the New York Times we're going to publish a material. I think it will be tomorrow. So just follow it closely. So the second question, how could you comment the decision of the EU to provide Ukraine with $5.9 billion to buy drones? There was a recent statement by Kaja Kallas. Is it a last step before the EU enters the direct conflict with Russia? Well, the countries that you mentioned before, the UK, France, and Germany, well, UK is not part of the EU, but France and Germany are part of the EU. And they're very active. They set the tone. Well, which is very interesting, because on one side they're speaking about peace, but in the context of the EU collectively, with the participation of France and Germany, they decided to give Ukraine almost 6 billion euros to buy drones, as if they do not understand that drones are not used to extinguish fires or for fertilizing fields, but these drones are used to kill civilians. So where's your truth? What side are you on? When you will determine your own position? Right now, the EU, of course, is the main driving force of the Western party of war. So they are supporting the terrorist activity of Kiev afloat. They're supporting the economy of production. They're not investing in culture or education. They're not interested in the development of Ukraine in the sphere of social aspects. No, they're sponsoring the terrorist activity of the Kiev regime. If we take the June of 2026, the help of Ukraine to Ukraine from the EU and its member states for military purposes was 75 billion euros. So they could use this money to implement Minsk Accords and make Ukraine one of the leading economies, not of Europe, but of the whole world. They could create so many enterprises. They could bring their business there, education, digital companies. They could build ports, railway stations. They could renew the whole park of passenger transport vehicles, from buses to the best trains. All of this 70 billion euros, they could be invested in the real future of Ukraine. That would be an example of humanism, of the human rights, of freedom that the EU is bragging all the time about. So for the nearest 2 times, the EU is going to provide 60 billion more only for military support of the Kiev regime. Part of it, as you mentioned, is going to be used for paying for the drones. There is no doubt what these drones are going to be used for. There's also a program for training of Ukrainian military. They deployed in their territory joint military and industrial enterprises, becoming a place where the armaments are being produced for the armed Ukrainian forces. So this makes the EU elites not only someone who participates in the Ukrainian crimes, but they will be responsible for the possible rapid escalation of the current conflict with unpredictable consequences. Thank you very much. Information Agency Sada Rus, are you here? Hello, Madam Zakharova. I represent Sada Rus. Hello. I would like to congratulate you sincerely on the Day of Russia, and I would like to wish you peace, prosperity to the Russian Federation. We started celebrating with the foreign students this important day because students are studying here the Russian literature. So, well, I would like to ask a question. On the margins of the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, the Vice Minister of Industry and Trade of the Russian Federation, Roman Chekushov, informed about the possible opportunity of signing an agreement of free trade between the EAEU and Pakistan. What is the assessment of the Foreign Ministry of the prospects of this agreement and its meaning for the development of economic cooperation between Russia, EAU, and Pakistan? There is work underway to research the potential economic effects from having a free trade zone between the EAEU and Pakistan. For this, a joint research group with participation of experts of both sides was created. We hope that as a result we will start official negotiations to liberalize trade. I would like to underline that it was Russia since 2024 being an initiator of including Pakistan into the list of promising EAEU partners. At the same time, we need to take into account that both process, the work of the group and the official consultations, can take some time necessary for creating qualitative content for the document. Potentially, we can say that the agreement will contribute to strengthening trade economic cooperation between the EAEU and Pakistan, opening new foreign markets for the producers of all sides of all countries that will participate in this format, and it can be an important element of future greater Eurasian partnership. And there is a second question. On the margins of the session of the Council of Foreign Ministers of SCO in Bishkek, Russia and Pakistan signed an agreement on cooperation in the sphere of countering illegal migration and fighting illegal drug trafficking. According to the Foreign Ministry, what is the significance of these agreements for further strengthening of Russian-Pakistani relations and expansion of practical cooperation between two countries? I can confirm that on the margins of the Council of the Foreign Ministers of the member countries of SCO in Bishkek on June the 5th, the Minister of the Interior of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Kolokoltsev, and the Minister of the Interior and the Control of Drug Trafficking of Pakistan, Maxine Razinakvi, signed several bilateral documents, namely the agreement between the government of the Russian Federation and the government of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan on readmission, and executive protocol on implementation, and MOU between the Ministry of the Interior of Russia and the Ministry of Interior and the Control on Drug Trafficking of Pakistan on cooperation in the fight against new psychoactive substances. These documents have become in addition to the bilateral legal basis.
In particular, the readmission agreement is a crucial component in regulating migration process and is a contribution to the fight against illegal migration. The memorandum, to a certain extent, builds upon the provisions of the 2010 bilateral agreement on cooperation in combating the illicit trafficking of narcotic drugs, psychotropic substances, and their precursors. We expect that the signed agreements will facilitate expanded interaction between the law enforcement agencies of the two countries and streamline related procedural issues. This is the agenda of the Ministry of Interior, but I do hope that our colleagues will not take offense, because this is the element of bilateral and multilateral cooperation in security cooperation. Thank you very much. Soyuzny TV channel, are you with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Let me congratulate you on the upcoming holiday of the Day of Russia. Ambassador Berdiev called the inspections of Russian ships a practice that contradicts freedom of navigation. For weeks now, the world has been watching as certain countries have effectively legalized piracy in international waters for themselves. Pirates of the 21st century are no longer a metaphor. This is our reality. How can the civilized community fight this? What countermeasures to such Western actions does Russia propose, legal, economic, or forceful? What will help stop this trend? I will just begin by the fact that Ambassador at Large, Berdiev, has a very instructive and interesting TV channel. We will add a link to the text of today's briefing, and he shares his professional view on the development of international economic issues and other relevant agenda items. The position is not new and embodies Russia's consistent line on this issue. It is based on international law and centuries old established customs in this area, which have a clear and well-formed interpretation. As you know, freedom of navigation on the high seas and in international straits is an unshakable legal principle that no one seriously disputes today. Yes, they violate this principle, but the very principle itself is not violated. Essentially, it is a key guarantee for the stable functioning of global supply chains and markets, including for essential goods such as energy resources, food and fertilizers, everything one cannot go without. This is the implementation of human rights, right to food, to medical assistance, to development. The West consistently advocates for the unimpeded movement of commercial cargo vessels. And just look how outraged they were at the situation in the Hormuz Strait. The West expresses its outrage when the interests are being affected, but the most interesting thing, the principles underpinning the logistics in the global waters and the global world ocean, they forget about it at once when they are being pointed out that they have violated the corresponding norms of international maritime law. They turn a blind eye to that, and they pretend that this question is not directed towards them, and we have already mentioned this quite often. Such statements are made in the context of the situations in the Strait of Hormuz and in the Taiwan Strait, and they treat quite sensibly when their own interests are being violated, not understanding that they themselves triggered the conflicts, and when they themselves are being involved in piracy and banditism, this all has to do with human losses, with cargo losses, financial damage, and environmental damage. They turn a blind eye and pretend that they have nothing to do with that. We see blatant hypocrisy and double standards. These are criminal double standards, and the game of interpretation. These are criminal double standards, elimination of any standards, intercepting ships under trumpeted up pretexts, citing certain national sanctions is a continuation of predatory neocolonial practices. This is merely one of the instruments of Western policy aimed at enriching themselves at the expense of others and engaging in fair competition. These practices also include the appropriation of foreign property, the destruction of seizure of financial assets, and terrorist attacks against major pipelines and energy infrastructure. The escalation of tensions along maritime communications threatens to completely undermine the stability of the global economy, which has already become a hostage to Western geopolitical ambitions, dictates, and tariff frenzies. The global South is becoming a direct victim of Western arbitrariness, as the Russian petroleum products, agricultural goods, and fertilizers transported by these ships are primarily destined for Asia and Africa, where they're in high demand. No one thinks that a large part of this cargo is a humanitarian cargo. Any forceful actions that bypass international law against the Russian merchant fleet are unacceptable. Such attempts by individual Western countries, where the tone is currently set by the exclusive for, in fact, the UK and France, who fancy themselves global placement, cannot but cause revulsion. Russia has set ambitious goals for itself, in particular to enter the top 10 leading countries in the world by total maritime transport tonnage. We do not merely speak about this, but we take practical steps. I would like to quote Vladimir Putin at the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. He put this out directly. We step up the capacity of the trans-Arctic transport corridor as a global artery. Under these conditions, repelling the West's radical tactics at sea is becoming one of our foreign policy priorities. Russia has a wide arsenal of tools and measures to eliminate this illegal and let's call things by their proper names, bandit activity. I will not disclose the mechanisms of our actions in this regard right now. They are multifaceted, ranging from political persuasion to the use of defensive tools. The West to the whole must understand that our response will be adequate and convincing. If you have no other questions, TV Plus, are you with us? Good afternoon. Speaking from TV Plus, I have a question. Unfortunately, my country is experiencing the Western pressure. We are facing criticism from the United States and the European Union that its position is not sufficiently harsh, its position towards Russia, I believe. What does Russia think of acting authorities in Georgia to oppose this pressure? And what support can be received from Georgian authorities? Let me get back to the quote of President Putin in Astana on November 28, 2024. We can only adore the strength of the people of Georgia because they did not allow the West to interfere into internal affairs of its countries. I believe that the potential of Georgia is not fully tapped, and let me express my own personal opinion. Georgia is not the largest and the most powerful state from the point of view of military or financial power. What is the source of its strength to oppose the Western pressure? I have many friends from Georgia, and I know many representatives of its culture. And I came to the understanding that the source of strength of Georgia is its faith and its own strength. And this became the rescue which helped Georgia not to get drowned into the Western narratives. The situation is going on for many years, and Tbilisi has made its own choice when it comes to guaranteeing the sovereignty of Georgian people and decency and own decency of its peoples. And sometimes people do not agree with the situation when they are being imposed a particular course, especially when it runs contrary to its history. And we understand the attempts of Tbilisi to put an end to dictate from the outside. We are ready to deepen Russian-Georgian ties. They are the key drivers for economic upheaval in Georgia, and we are doing this with an open heart. I will reiterate, Moscow is ready to extend our cooperation where it is mutually beneficial and built on the basis of mutual respect. Thank you very much. Congratulations. Lenta Ru, are you with us? Good afternoon. I align myself with the congratulations of my colleagues on the occasion of Russia Day. We have two questions today. Both have to do with post-Soviet space. On the sidelines of SPF, former Moldovan President Igor Dodon stated that Moldova will lose Gagauzia and Transnistria if it unites with Romania. Will Russia be able to help these regions in any way if such a scenario unfolds? I would like to say that I a little bit disagree with your interpretation of what Igor Dodon said. Moldova when absorbed by Romania, will not only lose some of its regions, it will lose itself as a whole. Now such a country exists. In case it is absorbed by Romania, it will cease its existence. Why? Because now people are being denied their nationality, language, and culture. They are being called Romanians, and they are not referring to some prototypes, to some shared basis and foundation, to some shared roots, but now they call them Romanians. One will no longer be able to speak about Moldova because this very word will be stamped out from books and textbooks, and we speak about the quote by Igor Dodon. I believe that he referred to a scenario in a slightly different context. According to him, the most dangerous turn of events would be Moldova being dragged into the conflict in Ukraine through an escalation of the situation in Transnistria, which is exactly what radicals in Kiev and Chisinau are trying to achieve. Yes, such a threat exists, so we see it. Russia will do everything possible to prevent this, and we call on all those who value peace on the Dniester to make every effort to avert such a scenario. As for the hypothetical unification of Moldova with Romania, it is indeed increasingly being discussed in Chisinau as a plan B in case the European integration project fails. Obviously, the idea of joining Romania in order to enter the EU through its appeals to many representatives in the upper echelons of power in both countries, and I believe the recent this example is quite relevant. With an example, to eat a man with a manhunter, because it will be, when he suggests going to the theater, because it will be more convenient to bring it there. And we believe that Romanian people will make sovereign choice, understanding and proceeding from the facts. However, Gagauzia and Transnistria have different foreign policy, strategic guidelines. They do not see themselves in either Romania or the European Union. Their residents, many of whom hold Russian citizenship, have repeatedly shown through elections that they strive to maintain the closest possible mutual beneficial relations with Russia. They see Russia as a protector country with which they share inseparable, multifaceted historical and civilizational ties, and we proceed from this premise. Thank you very much. My second question, going back to Kaja Kallas, on June 8th, the EU High Representative, commenting on the result of the parliamentary elections in Armenia, stated that the country had made a choice in favor of a European future. The Armenian people, although under heavy pressure from Russia, nevertheless chose a European future, and that is a good thing, she noted. What is the foreign ministry's attitude toward such statements from Brussels, given that Armenia does not hold the candidate status? No one can get anything else from Kaja Kallas, anything from lies, anything but lies. This goes in line with her biography. And perhaps the only person who might have not noticed this was the person who was not updated on the news, but any person who followed the agenda could notice that the European Union literally tried to manually control the electoral cycle. Here you had rapid response missions to hybrid threats, a massive landing, parties staging a political show in Yerevan in early May, at the very height of the election campaign, and the call by Ursula von der Leyen on June 4th, who urgently scraped together funds to support Armenia, and the cherry on top was the arrival of the head of the European Union, A delegation to the public, Central Electoral Commission just before the vote count began. In short, for the sake of the desired result, Brussels easily turned a blind eye to democratic principles and its own slogans about non-interference in the internal affairs of a sovereign state, of non-involvement into election campaigns of sovereign nations. As for the voting results, the EU propaganda machine is once again trying to turn everything upside down here as well. As I noted in my commentary on June 8th, support for the Civil Contract Party, despite all the manipulations by the current authorities, including repressions against the pro-Russian opposition, not pressure, these are repressions, and the massive use of administrative resources has significantly decreased compared to the previous elections. There is a clear demand with American society of real dividends and not some thought ones. And I just wonder who Armenia need to join in case the issue of European Union integration is brought up. Moldova will join Romania, and Armenia, it will join whom? This is the level of fraud and machination from Brussels is beyond understanding. The European Union structures deliberately imposed a false dilemma on Armenian society, artificially presenting the parliamentary elections as a fateful choice between the European Union and Russia. What does this have to do? This is a cynical manipulation that has nothing to do with true interests of Armenian people. The goal is obvious: to split the republic from within, tear apart the historical and socioeconomic ties between the countries, between the peoples, let alone any sentiments, to undermine any kinds of contact between Russia and Armenia, expand its sphere of influence in the region, and turn Yerevan against Russia and Yerevan.
Я просто напомню.
In the context of all these statements by Ursula von der Leyen and Kaja Kallas, I'll remind that Armenia is not even a candidate for joining the EU, but Brussels is already bragging about some kind of European future. And what is behind this idiom? Because the EU, in its current state, cannot offer to its partners nothing but economic stagnation, absolute unconscious arms race, extremely dangerous foreign policy adventures, including the joining the hostile anti-Russian policy. So when they called to Yerevan, why didn't they say anything about the economic indicators? It would be very interesting to listen. They could issue a press release with the data on the development, or better say degradation of their economies. But there is a small nuance. We're not speaking about the EU. It's not the world majority that introduced sanctions in the EU, but the EU surviving still has good indicators. But this is, in fact, the opposite. The EU is introducing sanctions, attacks civil vessels, sponsors a terrorist regime in Kiev, and shows the degradation of their own economies. So, simply speaking, the lack of resources that was always replenished, the lack of these resources resulted in the actions in Ukraine and in other parts of the world. So, under the source of the support of democracy and thinking processes, they started to close their economic lack of resources. So, supporting the hostilities on the European continent, they even make the economic situation in their states even worse. So this would be the end of my answer to your question. Thank you. Anadolu, are you here? Madam Zakharova, good afternoon. We're here. The question is about Sergei Lavrov, who had a meeting with one of the candidates for the post of the UN Secretary General, Michelle Bachelet. In April, he met with Secretary General of UN Conference on Trade and Development, Mr. Greenspan, who also wants to be the UN Secretary General. So who Moscow is going to support given the criteria? So which candidate is closer to Moscow? You said quite right. On the 8th of June, Sergei Lavrov met the candidate for the UN Secretary General, Michelle Bachelet, who was the previous president of Chile. In May, Sergei Lavrov had a meeting with a different candidate for the UN Secretary General, the Costa Rica. The representative of Costa Rica, Ms. Greenspan, who is the Secretary General of UN Conference on Trade and Development. He was also visited by Mr. Grossi, who also wants to be the head of the UN Secretariat. But Grossi was received as the Secretary General, of EAEU, and not as a candidate for the UN Secretary General. So now we're reaching the decisive phase of this process. In April, there was interactive dialogues during which most of the candidates were presented. There are 5 people, and they presented their election campaigns. They answered the questions of the member states. At the end of July, the UN Security Council will start an indicative vote process, according to which these are like several procedures, and during these procedures we will see the most favorable candidate, and his candidacy will be presented for the consideration of the UN General Assembly. We are following closely this election process. All the candidates stay in contact with us. We know their views on the reform of the UN, and its reform according to the existing realities. The UN Security Council should answer to a range of criteria. We have said it already, but we need to say that the Secretariat must be a very effective administrative organ, and it should be equidistant, be faithful regarding the UN Charter. It should promote the equitable agenda based on the consensus decisions, and take correct decisions considering the territorial issues. If we're speaking about the Secretary General Guterres and his team, now Secretariat is in a deep crisis. But as you understand, based on what I've said, part of this process is public and part of this process is closed. Thank you for your answer. Thank you. Virelka, are you here? Well, if Virelka is not here, Al-Maidin, are you here? Yes, we're here. Madam Zakharova, I congratulate you on the Day of Russia. I congratulate everyone. I think that we should love Russia. Then there will be peace all over the world. Thank you very much. The question is, next one. What Russia thinks about the pressure of the US on Cuba? Well, a very clear question, a very clear answer. The position of the Russian Federation has not changed. We're still in full solidarity with Havana, and we condemn intimidation, the use of illegal, unilateral, limitative measures and interference into internal affairs of the sovereign Cuban state. In this context, the American blockade against Cuba is one of the methods of the U.S. administration of establishing their own control over the Liberty Island in the context of the attempts to revive the Monroe Doctrine. Thank you. let's follow. Once again, Virelk, are you here? Yes, Madam Zakharova, we are here. Sorry, there was a technical problem. Once again, I congratulate you on the Day of Russia. They have two questions. We have answered the first issue, your assessment, the assessment of the elections in Armenia, but I would like to ask you about the dangers that were voiced after the elections by the political forces that want to preserve relations with Russia and develop relations with Russia. So we would like to hear your assessment about this. Well, please, once again, could you formulate the question, your opinion about the assessments and the threats against the opposition forces that want to preserve relations with Russia? I'll underline once again that on June 8th we gave a detailed comment of our position on this. And once again, I would like to state that the atmosphere of the electoral process in Armenia, including many informations that confirmed the information, raised a lot of issues. If Yerevan is really truly ready to follow the principles of democracy and rule of law proclaimed by the Armenian leadership, so we will wait for the determining results of the elections in Moscow. We are following what is happening. The total pressure, and I would like to say, is unprecedented pressure on opposition. Arrests even on the day of the election. The arrests of politicians and public figures that stand for the interests of Armenia, and they stand for the preservation and strengthening of Russian-Armenian relations. We cannot understand it, and for us it is absolutely unacceptable. I do not know, if we're speaking about democratic state, how can it be acceptable to arrest those people who participate in electoral processes on the day of election or the day before of election under a far-fetched pretext. So this is unacceptable, horrible atmosphere of repressions. All of this is not only bad in itself because it does not correspond to the declared track, it does not correspond to the legislation and legal obligations. Right now, it also has very direct results and consequences, a horrible division in the Armenian society. In my view, the task of every political figure that already has power is to contribute to the unification of nation, especially when we are speaking about a mononational state. Of course, there are representatives of different cultural movements, but basically it develops in very unified tracks. So we need to preserve this unity. This should be a cause for being proud. This is an asset that a political figure, state figure, should take into account, first of all. So we see a horrendous division which Armenian society has found itself now. So before the election, Russia has made very harsh declarations about the cooperation of Armenia with the EU. Will Russia's position change after the election, given the approach which after the elections was voiced by Mr. Pashinyan, that it will continue the Euro integration, but still Armenia will still be a member of the EAEU? Well, without removing the word harsh, I would like to add the word realistic. Yes, maybe it is harsh because many people had illusions. They were imposing this illusion on others. So it's harsh not because it is harsh, because there are no other options, but we wanted to return people to reality. In this context, it is harsh, but it is realistic, so I accept this definition. We said many times that our relations to Armenia are not subject to fanciful volatility. Even if these are difficult historic periods, elections, or results of the elections, what truly matters are fanciful steps and actions. We see that the authorities of Armenia rapidly move towards the EU in their deeds and in their words, and they were demonstrating it. Does anyone wait them for them there? Well, this is a rhetoric question, and I think the answer is obvious. Even those who were candidates are not weighted. So the Republican leadership tries to persuade their citizens that there is no option between the EU and the EAEU, so they can receive the preferences of the EAEU and be prepared for become members in another economic bloc. Well, it is not possible. Such attitude of dependence to us, to the EAEU partners, is not something that we will accept. It is harsh. Well, it is harsh, but it is realistic. Because we need to see the facts and we need to use them. On May 29th, at the meeting of the Supreme Eurasian Economic Council, the presidents of Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Russia adopted a joint statement which states that the preparation of Armenia to entering the EU can have a sustainable, very significant risks for economic security of the member states of the EAEU, so they need to have a joint analysis of this issue, and it will be done on the basis of specific actions and not political statements of Armenia. Moreover, these statements remind a little bit the weather forecasts. So because there is no some kind of a fact assessment, once we hear one thing and in the other statement we hear something else. So those who make the statements do not see any contradictions, but in any case they do it, but for some reason. The Голос Отечества, are you here? Madam Zakharova, good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon. Голос Отечества, Nadezhda Kotechnikova. I would like to thank you for congratulations on the Day of Russia, and I would like to join these congratulations. I would like to wish everyone to reach the goals set by Vladimir Putin so that our sovereignty was inviolable, and so that our opponents and enemies would remember that day when they wanted to inflict a strategic defeat on our country. Thank you very much. And I would like to ask a question now. The United States regularly make a reference to the rules-based order that you mentioned, which contradicts the UN Charter. So what we're speaking about, a replacement of the international law on the creation of a different legal reality. Please, could you give several examples where such a manipulation affects the system of global security? Thank you. Well, I'll start with the end. Well, I have given examples already. What are they doing in the sea, the seizure or the destruction or explosion, attacks against civilian vessels under the supposed pretext of the existence of shadow fleet? These are specific examples. There is international maritime law, which they signed. At the same time, they're posing not legal norms and they're not implementing them. They are imposing some kind of rules that they have created. There was a program that was approved by the UN in the context of the situation in Libya. This program ended, but at the same time, they keep following it. There is another example which is close to international law, but it contradicts its fundamental norms. Covering themselves, their actions with the international law, they introduce their own rules. But I would like to point out that over the recent years, this rules-based order has reduced. Dimensions of it reduced because people started asking question, why are you mentioning international law? Are you trying to cancel it like you are trying to cancel Pushkin, Tchaikovsky, and Prokofiev? So you think that you say that you're not committed to the UN Charter, and they found themselves in a stalemate. So in their formulation, the rules-based order is somehow the international law. But if this is the international law, why cannot you call it the international law? The decisions of the UN Security Council, international arrangements, multilateral arrangements, conventions, which their countries are participants, universal institutes, international original ones. This is the international law. Stop manipulating it. Of course, we see that our efforts give their results. They're starting to deviate from something that was obviously called by their narrative, and they stop imposing this narrative to everyone. So this concept was not accepted. It could not undergo the proof of time. It was not accepted by people. So this chewing gum was not taken by people as a food, and they just spit it out. This approach was imposed over the 10-15 years. It all started long before from the political platforms. And I think that 7-8 years ago, Russia started actively to ring all the bells, sound the alarms, saying that right before our eyes, we see the replacement. You know, there can be different kinds of theft. Sometimes you steal something, but sometimes there was a copy given instead of the original. This is how some artistic works are being stolen.
So that the fact of stealth cannot be revealed at once. This counterfeit would hinder the investigation because the picture is still in place, and only afterwards, during the expertise, one will learn the truth. Something similar happened in this case. They wanted to steal the international law, to distort it somehow, and only on the place of international law, they put instead the rules-based order, which is known to no one. This is what they were going to do, and Russia started to attract the attention of everyone that such replacement is taking place with a direct objective to get rid of international law. These memes or narratives were heard from U.S. authorities and other Western officials. They were moving from one document to another. From the outside, this is an innocent wording, but in reality, this was made in order to equal international law. Different and various standards elaborated during various Western get-togethers. They were going to integrate them and to reduce to zero or lose international law. These pseudo-norms are being written to serve mercenary interests of Western states and are imposed on the rest of the world under the guise of being allegedly universally accepted. However, when it comes to true norms of international law, agreed upon by all interested states, the West likes to turn a blind eye or to open eyes whenever it suits them, and this necessity is being established by themselves. Russia consistently opposes this trend. The 2023 foreign policy concept of the Russian Federation states unambiguously the mechanism for the formation of universal international legal norms should be based on the free expression of the will of sovereign states, and the UN must remain the main platform for the progressive development and codification of international law. Further promotion of the concept of a rules-based world order is fraught with the destruction of the international legal system and other dangerous consequences for humanity. By the way, this is an end quote. Madam Zakharova, thank you very much for such a detailed and instructive answer. News Front, are you with us? I also align myself with the congratulations on the occasion of Russia Day. I have two questions, if I may. The first one has to do with international terrorism. The Kiev regime continues to commit terrorist acts and sabotage against the civilian population of Russia amidst the deafening silence of the civilized world. In this regard, do you consider it necessary to hold a UN meeting and according to area formula to publicize and condemn the phenomenon of Kiev's terrorism? We systemically carry out information and explanatory work on the Ukrainian crisis. At the UN, we draw attention to all high-profile crimes committed by the Kiev regime. It was Russia that requested the convening of an emergency UN Security Council meeting regarding the terrorist attack on Starobelsk on the very same day, May 22nd. Our permanent representative to the UN, Vasily Nebenzy, held a separate press conference on this matter. And these efforts will be continued in this platform and on other platforms. Overall, there are various formats for conveying our position to the Secretariat and the UN member states, and we actively use all of them depending on which is the most effective in the current context. All our assessments are presented both in the public sphere during Security Council meetings, depending on what platform suits more the mandate. We will unfold our work and our efforts at this particular platform. Thus, I can reassure you that these efforts will be continued. Question 2, if I may. The Speaker of the Danish Parliament, Søren Gade, stated that Denmark has proposed that Kiev move the production of military equipment and ammunition to Danish territory to save the Ukrainian defense industry from Russian strikes. In terms of particular facilities, the decision has already been made of its press service, and in this case, Russia will view such locations as legitimate military targets, is stimulating military production with the knowledge that the products will be deliberately used against Russia, considered complicity in terrorist activity. What consequences await Denmark if this intention is realized? You have so many components in your answer. That is why, be patient. I'll respond to every component. Since the beginning of the special military operation, the Danish authorities have consistently pursued a sharply confrontational course towards Russia. They joined this concept. They have made up that they will inflict a strategic defeat on the Russian Federation. They are carrying out an overtly Russophobic rhetoric. One of the elements of Copenhagen's aggressive anti-Russian policy is the provision of massive military assistance to the neo-Nazi Kiev regime in terms of volume relative to GDP. Denmark ranks first in the world. If we take the assistance and make a relation with GDP, we see this personal, destructive Olympiad of Denmark. These should have been different first places, and this is the shameful first place they are taking. At our briefings on September 12th and December 4th, 2025, we already commented on the destructive, adventurous initiatives of the Danish side to host Ukrainian military production in its territory, including the construction of a firepoint plant in the city of Vayan for the production of solid fuel for missiles and UAVs, which began last year. We regard the deployment of the aforementioned facility and potentially other enterprises in Denmark in the interests of the criminal regime as a hostile step that undermines the prospect for political and diplomatic resolution to the conflict and carries the risks of further escalation. Of course, this is financing of terrorist activities and facilitating territory activities and implementing plans to house the production capacities of Ukraine military-industrial complex and its territory. Copenhagen is driven by rabid Russophobia and is willing to turn a blind eye to the involvement of the relevant Ukrainian companies in corruption scandals, to compromise basic industrial and environmental safety standards, and to ignore the opinions of its own population. This list can be continued. It is not fully exhausted. Every notion of human rights, humanism, freedoms are undermined. It is obvious that the weapons and their components, which are slated for production in Denmark by Ukrainian enterprises, will later be used to carry out terrorist strikes against the civilian population and the civilian infrastructure of the Russian Federation. We think it appropriate to recall the blasphemous remarks made by the Permanent Representative of Denmark to the UN, Christina Marcus Lassen, at the UN Security Council. The international community was shocked on May 22 in connection with Ukrainian armed forces terrorist attack on a college in Starobelsk. Not only did she fail to condemn the strike or express condolences to the families of the victims, but she even cast doubt on whether it had occurred at all, stating that Copenhagen, she said, was not ashamed of such a position. Perhaps she believed that this position must be clarified because it was questioned. This approach can only be described as a shameful mockery of the young people who died, as well as an act of aiding. And speaking about the consequences, the Russian Ministry of Defense recently published a list with the names and addresses of enterprises in Western Europe involved in the production of drones and their components in the interests of the Ukrainian armed forces. I believe you noticed the effect. Author, are you with us? Ruslan Pankratov. I align with my colleagues and congratulate you on the upcoming holiday. I have one question today. Perhaps I will shift the angle a little bit. Brussels talks about the EU's strategic autonomy all the time, but in practice this policy results in rising prices, deindustrialization, and a direct erosion of European citizens' welfare in order to continue the confrontation with Russia. Does the Russian Foreign Ministry believe that the EU's ruling elites have completely lost touch with the mood of their own voters and are willing to support an anti-Russian course at the cost of the internal destabilization and the rise of radical movements within EU countries themselves? I believe that a few words lack: the strategic autonomy of the European Union, the autonomy from common sense. This is the best characteristics of what is going on there. The interests of European voters have indeed been ignored for a long time by the ruling elites of the European Union who live in a parallel reality. I would like to say even more. This is not merely ignored, but runs counter to what European citizens are demanding from their authorities, regardless of the fact that democracy has not been banned there, in words at least. The very attempts of the European Union to abandon energy cooperation with Russia increase in military spending and sponsoring the Ukrainian regime have already led to disastrous consequences. Let us see the clear facts. The EU's economic growth rates have been below the global average for several years now. In 2023, the bloc's GDP increased by only 0.4%, in 2024 by 1%, and in 2025 by 1.5%. Moreover, the indicators of the bloc's leading economies are much worse. GDP growth in Germany in 2025 was a mere 0.2%, in France 0.8%, and in Italy 0.5%. Perhaps we will find some arguments to explain why things are happening in this way. Perhaps they are facing a natural disaster, a catastrophe, a man-made catastrophe. Perhaps the continents are facing some unthinkable challenges and sufferings they were unprepared for. Nothing of this kind. These all developments are man-made because they wanted to find solutions to emerging problems through legitimate means by interfering into domestic affairs of sovereign states, rechanneling resource flows, manipulating political agenda to serve their interests, and guaranteeing competition preferences for their own operators that do not go in line with WTO principles. As a result, this careless aspiration resulted not in their drinking champagne once having taken risk, but collecting bottles in order to keep afloat. We are not inventing these figures. This is their own statistics. This year, the situation will only worsen due to the Middle East crisis. The European Commission has downgraded the GDP growth forecast for 2026 from 1.4% to 1.1%. The national debt of European Union countries continues to rise. According to preliminary estimates, this figure will reach a record 84.2% in 2026. This trend has already begun to negatively impact the credit ratings of some countries in the bloc. The chemical, steel, and automotive industries are in crisis, in a profound one. Tellingly, according to the European Automobile Manufacturers Association, in 2025, the European Union's import of passenger cars from China in terms of value, 13.7 billion euros, exceeded its exports to China, 8.3 billion euros, for the first time. This is a situation that would have seemed unthinkable just 5 years ago for the European Union. Now it is their reality. Brussels responds to the multiplying economic problems the only way it knows how. It would be better to say, because they do not know how to do this, and they made it their political slogan. With yet another set of roadmaps and strategies, the effectiveness and the development of their favorite packages of sanctions. Overall, one gets the impression that the course towards their so-called strategic autonomy from Russia, but now we understand that it is the autonomy from common sense, which is the goal in and of itself, has gradually evolved into the demolition of national interests of their member states. If we try to find an answer to the question whether this regime is viable in the long term, it is obvious. This all results in nothing but global chaos on the territory of Western Europe countries, and we have all the indicators of that. Thank you very much. Embassy Life, Посольская жизнь, are you with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. I would like to congratulate you on the upcoming holiday. We have one question. During the SPF, there was a phrase, let's work, get down to work, brothers. Is this the political signal? How does the Foreign Ministry see that? Does the Russia side not consider diplomatic options to be exhausted? I believe that this, in the long term, when did we ever say brothers do not work? Let us recall where this phrase comes from. How did it emerge in our daily reality? The tragic developments that happened a decade ago on July the 10th, 2016 in Dagestan. Back then, the police lieutenant Magomed Turbagandov, when I recall what he did, I cannot hold my emotions because it will go down to history for centuries. Back then, the police lieutenant in Dagestan was seized by terrorists together with his family. Knowing that he was a law enforcement agency personnel, the terrorists told him to abandon service. He refused, and before he died, under the gun, he said, "Work, brothers, get down to work." This slogan was the act of resistance and a testament to all of us. It happened 10 years ago. The year of 2016, and this testament is relevant today as never before. For many people, it became the slogan, the guidance to action, because it is underpinned by a life of a person who sacrificed it for its country, for his brother in arms, and for true values. For his bravery and courage, he was awarded by the status of a hero of Russia. This phrase became symbolic and sacred. I cannot reproduce the quote directly. This was not my idea, and I will try to include it into the briefing text, the link. Without real actions and without real steps, any faith is dead. And this faith, with no concrete steps, is void, is dead. And it cannot live only as a theoretical part. It must be implemented in concrete actions and steps. This is why I refer not only to the symbolic meaning of these words, but also to the sacred ones. For Russian special services and law enforcement agencies, this became the symbol of loyalty to their duty. This is a password to the unbended spirit and for the defense of those who need this, and of course faith in true values. This became the so-called response.
Появились.
So there were versions of this phrase, like "work, brothers," "let's go, brothers." They were put on the chevrons, on the vessels, everywhere. Where people were fighting against Nazism and fascism, any ideology where civilians needed protection. So you could read these words everywhere. I know that you are following closely our briefings. Maybe you have paid attention that every time when I have to give a list of crimes committed by the Kiev regime against their own civilians and the civilians of our country and other countries, I end this passage with the numbers. I ended with the words that it confirms the relevance of implementing the tasks of the special military operation. We need to stop this horrendous acts committed by the Kiev regime and their clique to prevent the existence on the borders of the Russian Federation of an outright Nazi regime. or because it prohibits the Russian language, terrorizes Ukrainian and Russian and other nationalities that used to live peacefully on the territory of Ukraine. And if we take Kiev regime and its methods, the same methods were used by the bandits that 10 years ago killed Lieutenant Bagabanov that I've already mentioned. They are the same as the methods that were used by the terrorists and extremists that seized and captured kids in the school of Beslan, that captured families in the theater where there was Nordost musical performed, who took mothers, young mothers or pregnant women in the maternity house in Budonovsk, who were affecting the families, women and kids who were just sleeping in their homes in Volgodonsk, Moscow, and other cities. These are the same methods that were used by the fascists and Nazis, who were burying people alive, killing them on the national grounds, prohibiting them from speaking their own tongue, their own language. And they were using their own languages for producing, printing, editing works. They were destroying books. So the phrase that was said by the President of Russian Federation confirms the principled approach that was voiced on different levels. The goals of this special military operation must be implemented. Of course, we did everything to reach the results with the use of policy and diplomacy, and you have seen evidence of that. Russia, with its deeds, not just words, expressed its interest in it. In those world capitals like Paris, London, Brussels, Berlin, if they think that they continue their bloody business, that in fact means the destruction of the Ukrainian people, and they can continue inflicting strikes against the civilians, it means that the Russian armed forces will continue to work till all the goals are implemented. Thank you very much. I congratulate you once again on the Day of Russia. I wish you all the best. Thank you. Let's work, brothers and sisters. Thank you.